of Jamaica. Welcome now to the big story. So the Bank of Jamaica, the BOJ, has lowered its policy rate from 6% to 5.75% per annum, citing favorable inflation outlook and stable economic conditions. The BOJ's Monetary Policy Committee noted that inflation remains within the target range of 4 to 6%, with annual headline inflation at 5.3% in April 2025. The central bank projects moderate economic growth, high employment levels, and a surplus in the current account of Jamaica's balance of payments. And we have with us to dissect all of that and to give us even more than that right now, financial commentator David Wan as our very special guest. Good morning, Mr. Wan. How are you today, sir?
I'm fine, thanks. And yourself?
Not too bad at all. Great having you on the program with us to help us to understand a lot about what's going on. First of all, the matter of the reduction in the policy rate. What does that really mean to the average person, David?
Well, that doesn't have a direct impact on the average person, but it has an indirect impact. It should, because that policy rate is the rate that the Bank of Jamaica will give to the commercial banks when they have funds that they put in central bank that they don't need right away. So if that goes down, theoretically, the price that they charge their loans should go down a bit too, in theory. But it's not direct, it's indirect.
Mm-hmm. And I notice you use the word should, because I believe history tells us that they don't always go down.
Well, sometimes the banks will tell you they operate in a marketplace, for example, and the market forces may dictate some different pathway and not a direct linkage to the central bank rate, which has some merit in the sense that if I lent you some money last year for a 5-year period, and a year after I lent you the money, the Bank of Jamaica reduces my interest cost. If it's a fixed rate loan I gave you, the contract may not allow them to reduce the rate. But if it's a variable rate, there should be some room to modify that rate. Mm-hmm. So if you get what I mean, we already lent you the money for a 5-year period.
Yeah.
So those are some of the factors to take into consideration with this drop.
So, what impact is this reduction in policy rate likely to have now overall for borrowers and savers alike?
Okay. It should mean that there's it's a very small drop, 0.25%. Mm-hmm. It should mean that lending rates in general come down a bit, as well as deposit rate come down a bit. That's what it should mean.
Okay.
The magnitude of that drop varies depending on the bank, depending on the conditions, etc. But that's what it means in general.
Okay. Now, a reduction like this, although minimal, is it likely to have any impact whatsoever on Jamaica's economic growth prospects?
Yes, it will. Because if you just set aside the fact that it went down by 0.25%, the signal that sends to investors and people who are inclined to, do real estate projects, etc., the signal is that rates are coming down so that they may feel more confident to start projects, as opposed to a year ago where the trend was up from the BOJ. It kept going up. Now there's a signal that it's coming down. Mm-hmm. So yes, it will engender more confidence in investors. And potential investors.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any potential risks whatsoever associated with this kind of reduction, even although it's minimal?
I don't see very many risks, and I think the benefits far outweigh the risk, because even though the BOJ didn't mention the fact that there's 2 consecutive quarters of economic decline, they would have been taking that into consideration. You see, their main target, and they'll tell you, is inflation. And they're not supposed to be, watching other figures as much as this inflation figure. But the fact that the economy declined for 2 quarters, the GDP went down for 2 quarters in a row, it would have come in as a factor in terms of what they're thinking, even though they didn't say that in their report. So yes, the economy has been contracting, and I think this reduction in interest rates is welcome. Matter of fact, if you ask me, I think it's a bit late in coming, given the fact that the economy declined for 2 quarters. And so I think it's quite, the only risk that could come from lowering interest rates is that inflation could accelerate, because if people are able to access more loans because of the lower lending rates, that could create too much demand on goods and services. But I think that risk is quite low now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want us to turn our attention, if you will, to the recent increase in U.S. tariffs, David, and ask you what impact will this have on Jamaica's economy, and what measures really can be taken to mitigate any negative effect? All
right. The first and foremost thing to think about, where will this thing end? In other words, Trump keeps changing his pronouncements about what the tariffs are going to be. And they just reached an agreement for 90 days for a certain set of tariffs. So for the next 90 days, it should be fairly constant. Now, the impact on Jamaican business, I think, is potentially significant, because many of our merchants buy goods from American companies who have in turn bought those goods from China. And the reason why some of our merchants would buy from American companies is because many of our companies here in Jamaica can't afford the quantities that are required to buy directly from China. So you have to go through a wholesaler in the U.S. who has bought a large quantity and sells to the smaller entities. So if those wholesalers in America get hit with the tariffs, it's going to mean increases in goods, price of goods, for those merchants who buy through U.S. companies, buy Chinese goods through U.S. companies. That's the potential impact on us, which could mean a uptick in inflation.
Yes. Another matter that I personally am watching is what is happening in the geopolitical space. We know that there are tensions between the USA and China. We see there's some talk of peace. Hopefully that will come through for Ukraine and Russia. But are these things that are happening in the wider world likely to have any impact on our economy here in Jamaica?
So far, I don't think there's been much. I mean, I think I've heard of companies who used to buy commodities from Ukraine before the war, like steel. But I think there are other sources. And I don't think the wars thus far have had a significant impact on our economy. Thank goodness. And that's due to a multiplicity of suppliers. If you used to get stuff from, Ukraine, you can get it from elsewhere. So thus far, it's not been significantly impacting our economy, as far as I can tell.
Okay. Knock on wood, I hope it remains that way.
Hope so too, and I hope they can resolve it. And I hope that, especially Gaza, which is now, bordering on genocide, if you ask some people, I hope they can resolve that quickly. Yeah. Because it seems very unbalanced to me,
I tell you, and a number of countries are reacting. I think the UK and Canada are among those who are staunchly in resisting, those advances by Israel into Gaza.
That's right.
Yes. Now, David, I know that the BOJ, they had projected moderate economic growth. What is that saying in terms of things like employment levels and GDP growth? Explain that for me.
Well, when they say moderate, you can interpret that to mean maybe 1.5% to 2% annual growth. As far as employment, in case you haven't been following it, employment is at a record high in Jamaica, even before this bout of inflation. So it's now in the high 3s, 3.6, 3.7, somewhere thereabouts. And we have never seen that kind of unemployment level for many, many years. in the past 35 years I've been keeping track of this, I've never seen the unemployment rate so low. So, and the reason for that is multiple. The many construction projects going on around town at the same time is absorbing a lot of labor, as well as the growth of the call centers that was, up until a year or two ago was very high growth. It's absorbing a lot of the labor. And the highway construction and other public projects going on absorbed a lot of labor. So I think the retailers were feeling the brunt of it at the low skill level, finding people to come to work, because these other jobs I just mentioned would pay more than the retail level.
Yeah.
So I think we're in a good position in terms of the official recorded unemployment rate. No, there's an elephant in the room that we don't often talk about, is that there are well over 500,000 persons in Jamaica who are not children and not retirees that have pulled themselves out of the workforce. So they don't count in terms of that 3.5%. If you counted them, the unemployment rate would have been a lot higher. But for many reasons, these people took themselves out of the job market. Some have gone to entrepreneurship. Some have gone to, I think, illegal, activities. And some have just given up hope of finding a job. So that's another factor to consider alongside this low unemployment rate.
Yes. My final question to you this morning, David Wan, is how do you see it in terms of the economic outlook for the foreseeable future, maybe the near to medium term?
I think it is quite positive in terms of, over the last 10, 15 years. Let's take 2013, where there was that famous agreement with the IMF on this whole debt management system that we are now in, that we're reducing our debt. The growth in tourism and the number of hotels that are under construction are almost completed is quite significant. There's a huge backlog of hotel rooms to come online. Now, that wouldn't have come online if the investors in those hotels didn't see a good trajectory for tourism in Jamaica in the short term and the medium term. That's one. And the call centers, I think, I'm still hearing stories of expansion of call centers. I just spoke to one last week, and they said they're about to double their headcount over the next, 2 years. So those two sectors, plus the building construction that we see going on, I'm not sure if it has plateaued as yet, but I must tell you, everywhere I drive in Kingston, every 2-3 minutes, there's a new building that you see under construction.
Yes.
So that will keep the economy buoyant if it doesn't fall off because of, overbuilding. So those three sectors, I think, will keep us with a strong positive outlook for the near term, as well as into the medium term.
Okay. David, the important thing is that you came on and you explained it in a way that the average man, even like myself, can understand. And I really appreciate the thoughts you shared with us this morning. We hope to have another conversation with you sometime in the near future. But thanks again for your thoughts and your time this morning, and I wish you a great day.
You're welcome.
All right. Take care. A chat there with financial commentator David Wan, ladies and gentlemen.